So, welcome to Foundations TV. When we
Well,
think
thanks.
about innovation and smart, the two keywords, the images that come to my mind are usually smartness is tied to consumer electronics like smartphones, like smartwatches, and Apple or Samsung. When we think about
Mhm.
innovation, the images that come to my mind are large enterprises investing a lot of time and resources in building new products. I can never imagine in my wildest dreams smart, innovation, and government together in one sentence. But there is one guy who is working relentlessly to change that. And the one guy we have in our studio today as our guest. And the guy is none other than Jonathan Reichental, the CIO of the city of Palo Alto. Welcome to our studio, Jonathan.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be able to talk to you today.
Thank you. So, I know you have been in the public sector for quite some time, and prior to that, you were in the private sector. So, share with us what motivated you to move from private to public.
It's a great question, and those that know me were probably as surprised as I was when I took this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I did need some convincing. I hadn't been thinking about the public sector as a place to play and innovate and change the game. But it was really compelling as I began to look at the details, as I began to understand the challenges that face our cities, where all of us now live, and the bulk of humanity will live over the next couple of decades.
Mm-hmm.
You know, out of 7 billion people, 5 billion will live in cities
Yep.
in the next 20 years. And I saw, 21st century problems occurring in 20th century environments.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a technologist and as a problem solver, this seemed like a really interesting place to work, to make contributions,
Mm-hmm.
and to move the needle forward. As we'll talk about a little bit today,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges are huge. They're absolutely huge, and they feel intractable. But again, it depends who you are. And from my perspective, this seemed just like a great, meaty challenge to get my teeth into and contribute in some valuable way.
And you have done an amazing amount of contribution so far to your city. So,
Well, thank you.
when you moved to this new role, I know you have done a lot of innovation. Did you start innovation on day one? And how was your experience of innovation different in city versus in a private sector?
Sure. Well, the similarity between innovating in the private sector and innovating in the public sector is you have to have leadership support.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have in this case, here in the city of Palo Alto, we have a council,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a city manager. You have to make sure they're invested in this and they believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that certainly streamlines things. The same experience I had in the private sector, where I was able to help my organization or the organizations where I consulted,
Mm-hmm.
was when they were committed to changing the game.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked me, did I start innovating on day one? No, but I knew on day one that I would have support.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what I did was, and this is a best practice, I guess, because it's helped me in a couple of roles, is I had to build credibility. I had to convince people that working alongside my team, we could deliver it as promised.
Mm-hmm.
And that would then build credibility, which would allow us to do the more complicated, more risky things, if you like.
Yep.
So one of the first things we did here at the City of Palo Alto was we replaced an old telephone system
Okay.
with a state-of-the-art telephone system.
Okay.
And as a consequence, people recognize, okay, this new guy is able to work alongside his team and some external partners to deliver something important and complex
Mm-hmm.
and mainstream. This builds credibility. And now I can start to ask for some capacity
Yep.
and investment to try the things that are harder. So it wasn't on day one. It took some time.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get one win and two wins and you start to do other things, that allows you, it buys you the ability to do the more leading edge things.
Excellent. So In your phase of building credibility with your team and the workers at City, in the hindsight, do you think the fact that you were the CIO of City of Palo Alto, which is a very high-profile city, given its very well-known residents, do you think that plays somewhere in the mind of your teams to encourage innovation? If imagine you were a CIO of some other city, do you think you would have the same amount of clout to influence that level of innovation?
Well, it's a terrific question, and it's one that's asked a lot because people want to see, can they copy what we're doing here, and can they learn? And they're fearful that if they're missing one of the big characteristics, that they won't be able to actually achieve the same results. Now, I'll be the first person to admit that it does help being the CIO for the birthplace of Silicon Valley and the heart of Silicon Valley. That does help, and we do have a community that is surrounded by and participates in the innovation economy. But the things we do and the way that we do them are absolutely can be repeated in multiple cities. They're not unique to any specific capability we have. Right? What might be unique is the support and the appetite for risk taking,
right.
And that you don't necessarily see in a lot of cities. But what is not unique and can be duplicated is having a strong vision,
right.
Trying to acquire and get support, making investments in the right place, looking for significant efficiencies around the methods that you use to deploy it. So, I say to a lot of my CIO cohorts, the most difficult decision is deciding to do this, deciding to have an innovation posture, have a forward-thinking IT strategy. That's the hard part. The execution is easier once you got that strategy in place and you got the support for the strategy.
Right.
The assumption is too that you have adequate funding. Now, I will say that not every city has the funds to do what they need to do. That is a dynamic of working in government. It's not evenly distributed in terms of available cash. But then you got to look at things like creative partnerships.
Right.
Who can you work with to make things happen when you don't have sufficient resources? So the city of Palo Alto does lend itself towards being an asset to your question. But ultimately, it's not the key characteristics of our success here.
Okay, great. So I'm dying to talk about two of your favorite subjects. One, I've heard so many things about smart city. And second, I've also heard about the biggest hackathon that you guys conducted in the city. So tell us more about both of these big phenomena going on in your city.
Well, let's talk about smart cities first, your first part of your question. We have to think completely different about urbanization. So just a few years ago, we went from being a rural world to being an urban world by passing the sort of 50% mark. Out of a population of approximately a little over 7 billion, 3.5 billion now live in an urban environment. And as I said earlier, another 2 billion will join here in the next 20 to 25 years. And our cities, for the most part, were built over the course of decades, if not more than 100 years, in some places many hundreds of years. And our infrastructure and our capabilities are all based around things and problems and populations that existed a long time ago. So as we enter the 21st century, we're very poorly prepared for the challenges that are happening right now, and for the needs of large amounts of people living in a very dense urban environment. So we have to think completely different about how we solve these problems. I call it basically applying. We can no longer apply 20th century solutions to 21st century problems. We have to apply 21st century solutions. And those 21st century problems, not all of them, solutions, are not yet all developed or even innovated against.
Exactly.
And that's what we mean by being smart and actually being smarter, which, because we don't make the assumption, that people who work in cities are not already smart. We're surrounded by wonderfully intelligent and capable people. We have to think about the complexity of cities and the complexity of problem solving in smarter ways. We have to adopt more technology, as we will. We have to integrate things. You know, the Internet of Things, the ultimate platform for cities. You know, when you start connecting transport system elements like cars and traffic signals, so traffic signals work with, you know, dynamic behavior, and don't have the same sort of cycle, you know, change signals even when, you know, there's no cars coming. They should change appropriately with the flow of traffic. You know, looking at how we consume energy, and if we ourselves produce energy, let's say through solar, we give energy back into the power grid. This is all about thinking about all those elements of transportation, energy provisioning, sustainability, healthcare, you know, all these multiple dimensions. Think about them differently, think about new solutions, and think about where we can integrate and make them intelligent. And so that's really compelling and exciting. And by the way, it's an incredible economic opportunity.
So
it's going to be worth...
Sorry, so let's take this example. Let's say I am a resident of your city. Help me visualize, if I continue to live in the same city 20 years from now, how would my life be different if I'm living in a smart city? Help us understand some examples that people can relate to.
Sure. Well, you know, I'm not... I'm humble enough to know that I don't know what it'll be like in 20 years.
Okay.
But I can tell you where we're sort of tracking against, right? We do need solutions for traffic, parking, and transportation in general. Today, 30% of the traffic in an urban environment is created by people looking for a parking space. So if we can find parking spaces easier, there'll be less traffic. So one would hope as we get more intelligent, driving, finding parking spaces, and generally the convenience of driving around will be eased as we get new technologies. We should see some improvements there. The situation shouldn't be getting worse, but should be improving over time. We talked about, you know, here in the city of Palo Alto, we're investing heavily in a new traffic signal system that will be intelligent, that will work with you, and allow traffic to flow smoothly, and to allow traffic to be very safe. One could imagine too that we've moved from being a carbon based community in terms of energy. So by the way, Palo Alto is already ahead of the game. We're barely using carbon based energy anymore. But communities that use a lot of coal and gas, they can imagine it's now absolutely conceivable in the future the bulk of energy will be provided by non-carbon fuel, for example, wind, solar,
and
others. So what does that mean? Well, everything from your bill should look different. I mean, if you live in a smart home with that has solar on it, and you may be able to provide free, abundant power for yourself, and if you have it in excess, you may be able to provide to others. Third example, just to kind of complete the question, is, you know, today when you have to interact with government, not every interaction is wonderfully pleasant, and I mean maybe you have to wait, right? You have to queue up, you have to take a ticket queue, and you think to yourself, wow, I could have done that on my home computer. I could have done that on my smartphone. Why did I have to go to a city facility, wait for 2 hours to get something done? When we think about a future as a smart digital city, a lot of those activities we imagine will be digitized, automated, and be available to you in your smartphone. In cities today, we're seeing a lot of that already. You know, here in a small city like Palo Alto, we have over 50 services that you can already access using a web browser or a mobile device, and we'll only see that list of available capabilities increasing with each year as it passes. Your need as a citizen to go to a city hall or a city facility should be almost nil. You know, within a few years. I consider my role here at the city of Palo Alto a privilege. I get this opportunity in this great place to do very interesting things, work with really terrific people. And the community is benefiting, and I benefit from the community. We all benefit together. But the bigger picture is, how do you take advantage of an incredible platform like the City of Palo Alto and use it for the benefit of others?
Yep.
And we ask this question a lot. I spend a little bit of my time getting out into the field, if you like, and talking about it. I get invited to conferences. I get invited to your show, and where I can talk about these things. And I get interviewed for magazines. And for us, that's useful time because it's a small amount of time, but it's where we are able to influence and add value to the bigger picture, to creating a smart country, as you said. So part of it is that. Now, I'm only one person, so that's not really scalable, right? So we have, to the best of our ability, we have to codify the things that we do. Now, an example of that would be, we had a very successful apps challenge this year, which resulted in 3 working apps and 3 businesses. And many people call me up and say, how did you do that? What did you do? So rather than sort of bit by bit explaining to people, we've created a playbook. We actually created a book which is in the final stages of being finalized, and we'll make that open source, and anyone can have it. It'll be free, and that'll be a version of what we did, and cities are free to use it and replicate it. So we think that's one model. We think publishing and talking about what we're doing is an important other model. So there's clearly other government organizations that we get a chance to participate in. There's the Alliance for Innovation, and there's the National League of Cities. There's the Center for Digital Government. There's a lot of government organizations that their purpose is to spread best practices and to elevate ideas in cities. And we're quite active in those areas to share our best practices.
Excellent. I'm so looking forward to somebody like you coming into my city.
Well, thank you.